Hello, and welcome to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efraín Martinez. I am a principal in search of wisdom, and I have found productivity to be a great tool for success. Picture this. This book opens with an electricity moment. It plunges us into the riveting experience of school principals and superintendents. We are first introduced to Glenn, navigating the minefield of a tense board meeting where tough decisions loom large. Then, seamlessly, we transition to Danny's narrative, where he grapples with an ever watchful supervisor, scrutinizing his every step. How do these leaders confront such daunting realities? Enter the book on Staying Calm in the Chaos, a beacon of guidance, equipping us with the tools to maintain composure amidst the storm. Today in the show, we have Danny Bauer, who is a 3 times best-selling author and host of the Better Leaders, Better Schools podcast, and Glenn Robbins, who is an award-winning principal and superintendent of the Bridgerton, I think I mentioned that correctly, Public School District in New Jersey. Gentlemen, how are you?
We're great. We're excited to be here, I think. Right, Danny?
Awesome.
Always happy to be with you, Glenn and Efrain. I mean, we get to talk. This is exciting. Glenn, you need to add best-selling author to your bio now because that's true. So congratulations.
Best-selling author. We are so fortunate to have you both here. So let's dig in. I had the luxury of reading this book via my favorite method, which is Kindle. I was like underlining so much that at the end I had to compress. So here are the questions I have about the book. So let's begin with number one. In the tumultuous landscape of educational leadership, how can Stoic wisdom guide principals and superintendents to maintain composure and lead effectively amidst adversity?
It's a great beginning question.
Yes, I say he's not messing around. We're into the thick of it right away, Danny.
Yeah, jumping right in. Yeah, good morning. How you doing, guys? So, some I'll say. Seneca said, "If you don't know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable." And the way we tried to package this book is to look through the 4 Stoic virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. And not that that's necessarily a vision, but they're guardrails, almost like bumpers on a bowl. Remember bowling, right? As a kid, they put bumpers on there so you didn't land in the gutter. And so I think when you start to investigate what these virtues are all about, it's really about, stopping this sort of low performance, stopping any catastrophic events, so that you don't end up in the gutter. The inverse is also true though, right? So it's easy to think in school leadership because stuff is very challenging, very difficult. The negative side of things, that could really bring me down. But at the same time, when things are going really great, right? All the winning that you're doing, all the success, which does happen in school too, you don't go too crazy that way either with a big ego or make mistakes out of success as well. So I see it as guardrails. But Glenn, what do you think?
Yeah, I think looking at it from the lens, like you can either act angry at the world because the world is acting angry at you, but the world doesn't care. It's not paying attention to you, So I look at it like from the lens that, one of Marcus's quotes, it talks about when you wake up in the morning, you tell yourself the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, jealous, and surely. And it goes a little bit deeper than that. They're not really sure, why they see the world this way. But being a school administrator is probably one of the most amazing jobs in the world, and also probably one of the hardest jobs in the world. Because the second you turn from smiling to a straight face or something else, your staff is seeing that, your kids are seeing that. And you have to remember, we get to work with kids. We get to work with amazing human beings who wear their hearts on their sleeve, their teachers, that want to make the best for these kids, who are giving so much effort and time and money, probably behind the scenes, into their classrooms.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes we get so caught up into the wrath of what the world is, and we forget about that when you walk down the hallway and a little kid gives you a high five or gives you a hug, or you go into a room and you see the learning that's taking place and you see the light bulbs going off in the head. There's nothing better than that.
Right.
So sure, yeah, we can rage and rage and rage, but what good does that do? All you're doing is punching air. You know, like I said, it is an amazing experience, but it's a mindset, right? Are you gonna
Mhm.
let the best day happen every day, or are you gonna let the worst little thing happen while sitting in traffic wreck you for the rest of the day and knock over every domino, continuing all day long? So it's not easy. It is not easy. We all know that, and I think having good people around you to have some kind of a conversation or a network definitely can help ease the pain a little bit every once in a while.
Beautiful. Thank you both. I appreciate that. And it's interesting because you both started in educational leadership and you both took different paths. The Like I mentioned in the introduction, I was like it got me right there. I think whoever was your editor, they're amazing because it really begins with two parallel stories. One of Glenn coming to a board meeting where unfortunately he has to give the bad news of all these cuts happening that are beyond the control of the district. Yet the people that he's trying to serve sees this as perhaps a breakage of trust, and yet he has to keep this control. So Glenn, can you tell us about that story, about what you have learned about that experience?
Yeah, it was not easy, and that was the Marcus quote that always resonates with me. Danny knows this. My favorite one is the stone that unturned as the waves crash over. You have to sit there and take it, and you can. Your job as an educational leader is to prepare your school board, prepare your staff, and give them the understanding of what's coming down the road. And I did that, and I did that for several years. And no matter what, it didn't matter until it actually came to that night, and where the actual action was going to happen. Um, and that's hard because you're giving it out of the kindness of your heart. And I think educators and leaders have to understand that. Like, you're going to lead some amazing people, but when it comes to money or their livelihood, they're going to change in a minute. And you have to continue to think of the greater good of the organization. You have to think of leading your board. You have to think about all the other people in the organization. Um, we've seen, and Danny and I talked about this before, so many amazing educational leaders who are getting destroyed right now in the world and or have left the field. And
Hmm.
that's a concern for us, because if it's not us leading and staying strong and trying to get through these times, then who will be leading our teachers? Who will be leading our kids? And what will our future then be? Like I said, there's amazing people who just could not take it anymore, and rightfully so, for all their mental, spiritual, and physical capacity that could they could handle. Maybe something bigger and better came along that with less stress. But in today's day and age, it is an angry world. It is I want things now, and it's very hard to make everybody happy. But like I said, focus on the good, focus on the overall organization, focus on what your job is to do, and continue to move forward without taking anger and then doing something else, stupid 5 minutes later. Um, I don't know if I dived into it enough effort, because
No,
it
I
had so
I
much
think
traumatic expense and times when I dealt with this. So
it's a lot
I'm
of
trying to relate.
PTSD for sure. I felt identified when I started as a principal in the city of Chicago. Schools have like small boards which play the same role, and oh my goodness, I definitely was not a reader of anything of philosophy, so I didn't know how to address the pressures of people getting in your face and yelling at you and calling you names and posting on social media. I didn't know how to deal with that. But that's why we have books like yours that allow us to see things from different perspective. Danny, in your case, your story is very intriguing at the beginning as well, because,
Hmm.
and I also feel identified because I have felt at some positions that I have had where every single step is being tracked, and it's like
Yeah.
there, everybody is like, oh no, one person is waiting for me to spill my coffee to say, you see,
Mm,
you're bad. Can
yeah.
you tell us about your story and how you apply any of these teachings into your beautiful outcome? Because you ended up opening a
Mm.
different door that you didn't know was waiting for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm gonna touch on that, Ephraim. But the other thing I want to point out, what Glenn said, talking about the current world and how tough it is. Maybe it's always been that way, right? And so what Stoicism does again is helps you figure out how to navigate those turbulent waters and challenging times. Or the local school council, that's what you're talking about in
Yeah,
Chicago, where
yeah,
they're in your face. Glenn is way more a student and much more wise when it comes to like Stoic history and stuff. So I can't give you all the details that he can. I know the big ideas, but one thing that he's taught me too. You have Marcus Aurelius, which he quoted earlier in this show, right? Talking about people's sort of basic attitudes towards you. And here's the Roman emperor, right, who's dealing with the same stuff that school leaders are dealing with today, and this was thousands of years ago, right? So that's one reason we really enjoyed bringing this book too, to the marketplace and to ruckus makers, as I call them in education. This is timeless wisdom. And to your question, it's actually where I was introduced to philosophy, because at the time I was a principal, and I don't know what happened, but overnight a relationship that was really strong, very positive, seeming in lockstep, like my supervisor and we saw eye to eye on everything, and then all of a sudden, overnight, I have deep concerns about your leadership. Deep concerns. Well, tell me, please, right? I want to get better. And reflecting on it, I know that I can improve. To this day, I still have areas where I can grow. But I knew in that moment that something was off with that comment, because nothing had changed about me. But our relationship had changed, and the feedback I was getting, it was all very strange. So I think in closing, in terms of unpacking this situation, I had a choice. I could start to play a bit smaller, and I did for a minute, to be honest, right?
yes.
I could get really upset and think about, like, how could I even get back at them? I went there. I was in a super dark place, for a while. But the book that landed in my lap, I'm so thankful for, was Ryan Holiday's "Obstacles the Way." Right? What a beautiful framing of challenges that we are guaranteed an experience to have. We're going to get sick, right? We're all going to have an expiration date, so to speak. we're going to spoil at some point, and tough things are going to happen. Good things too. And again, it's these bumpers, these boundaries, these guardrails, and how to deal with it. But the framing of the obstacle as the way is essentially, how do you turn this challenge into an opportunity? So I just figured, hey, listen, I could see the writing on the wall, to be honest. You know what I mean? And so I figured, well, let me ride this out and make it, the best I can in the limited time I have, and make the change that I knew that I can make with the influence I had, right? And then as well, the feelings of poor Danny, the feelings of, well, I'll show them and get them back, those started to melt when I flipped my mindset to opportunity. And I'm so thankful, because what I realized is that if I had been successful there, right, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now with Glenn and Ephraim. It wouldn't have happened. And that's just another way that my life could have gone. But doors have been opened, right? And my influence and my ability to help other school leaders, right, has greatly expanded, all because of that terrible situation. Because what it taught me is that I need to go all in on myself, right? And Better Leaders, Better Schools became my full-time thing. And look at us now, right? So here we go.
Amazing. Thank you so much, both of you. So, reflecting on the concept of ataraxia or inner tranquility, how can Stoic practices assist school leaders in finding peace of mind despite the chaos and unpredictability inherent in the education system?
You want to chime in on that, Glenn?
Yeah, I'm just really impressed by his questions this morning. So this man did his homework, and I love it.
Oh yeah, he texted me and emailed me. I mean, Ephraim is in the details.
So, but I love it because here's the thing: he's trying to help out other leaders right now, and he's talking about everything that we experience on a daily basis, no matter where we are in this world. And Danny's story that he shared, I saw a fellow coworker go through the same thing, except he took it to the different angle. He didn't take it to the obstacles away. He took it to that dark place and just continued to be naive and not realize that, his time was coming to an end soon there. So how do you get to this, this temperance? And I've been talking to some people who've been reading the book, and they love the temperance part of the book. Because it is trying to find that ultimate stillness. Like, we say we can do it, but yet with everything going on, like, how many questions, Ephraim, do you answer in a day? And how many decisions do you have to make? And I look at it from like a pro baseball, basketball, whatever star you want to do. I watch soccer. So, if you get angry at one play, and the next play you're angry, or next play you're angry, and just think of all the waves you just set off for all the wrong reasons. The butterfly effect in your building, or in your district. And once that's out there, it's like toothpaste, right? You can't get it back in the tube. And I think this is where, you talked about finding philosophy. Danny found his at his time, and I found mine at my time, which is like, serene, like almost like a divine act. Like, it came to you at that time that you needed that to help guide you through these tough situations. And for me, it came through having so many different conversations on X or Twitter, and then following different authors and finding Rowling as soon as he posted his book, but then reading into history more, like I mentioned, as a history major. And it's not easy. I grew up on the back of a well drilling rig. So we drilled for water wells. And, when people say, Glenn, I'm sorry if I embarrass you, sorry if I hurt your feelings, I'm like, you got to work a lot harder than that, because I was like a roughneck on the back of that thing and saw and heard everything. So for me, it was seeing that angle. And I think that helped. I think that really did. Seeing an extreme, hard, blue collar job, and then going to the white collar job, and then seeing all the emotions and how you have to handle them professionally and within ethics and morals and laws, and yet still try to ground yourself. Like, that is so difficult. Like Danny said, like, he could have went to that dark place, and we've all been there, and we still go to that dark place every once in a while. I know I do, as much as we try to aim to be the calm and the chaos. But what do you do to get out of it? And how do you recenter yourself? How do you get back into those bumpers you said? Are you taking walks? Are you taking fresh air? Are you doing gratitude walks and talking about great things that are going on? Are you appreciative and going into classrooms or just talking to parents? Are you listening to 7 great things that people are telling you? Or are you still focusing on that one negative email that you got, or one negative person? And we're all guilty of that. So a long time ago, I heard from somebody just say, focus on your best people. Focus on the best people, your 95%, and keep giving them what they need, and the rest will come. Because if you start focusing on your worst people, and you start focusing on, all that, then what good is going to come out of your district, or what comes out of your building? So, and lastly, don't take it personal. Don't take it personal. I know that's easier said than done, right? And everybody says I can take things personally, but take it personal when it's a positive remark about you. Other than that, would you take the remarks that these people are sharing with you, like are angry or whatever? Would you take advice from them? Would have they ever been in your shoes? Have they ever gone and sat through all these different meetings and all these different things you've done? You got to ask those questions because unfortunately, our mind plays tricks, and we do a lot of Machiavellian style, backstabbings, and you got to stay grounded and know what to work on, what not to work on, what needs your attention, what doesn't need your attention. Because as we mentioned in the book, there's tons of drama in school, and you can get involved in all that drama all day long. You're not going to be very successful after that. Danny, I we're all long-winded there, buddy. So
No, what I was thinking about is like, do you want to be Draymond Green? From the Golden State Warriors, and no offense to him, his family, or anything like that. Like, I don't know him, right? But that's kind of the point. I only know what I can see. And he has a certain type of reputation in the NBA. And for somebody who's watching or listening to the podcast, right? If you don't know Draymond Green, he gets himself in trouble in the NBA by like basically hurting other players, right?
Mm-hmm.
And losing his cool. And so much so, like the NBA was like, you can't play for a while. Go to therapy. I don't even know that that's happened before, right? So obviously he has a lot of stuff going on inside. And again, I don't know him. But the point is, if you don't have the philosophy or something to help you regulate, we're really talking about inner awareness here and emotional intelligence. And he's under incredible pressure as a professional athlete, right? The stakes are on the line every play, let alone if you make it to the playoffs, and the Warriors often do. He handles it well sometimes. And when he doesn't handle it well, the world knows, right? And that becomes your reputation. So I bring that up too, because sometimes there's people out there in the world too that can act as our mentors as well, because they're teaching us what not to do, right? So it's something to study, And the other thing with this inner tranquility, we're really talking about equanimity here, you know what I mean? And the way Glenn and I, in our other co-author Ariel, frame the book, we have wisdom, courage, justice, temperance. When you apply all those virtues, the end result, the byproduct, the gift that you get yourself is this idea of equanimity. And I will tell you guys this, my favorite compliment. So Glenn said, don't take things personally, but take the positive personally. So one comment that I take really personally, it's the best comment, positive comment I ever received. Same situation, right? Same school where I'm just, I guess, blowing everything up and making it a terrible place, I say that tongue in cheek. Michelle, my counselor in 6th grade, she said, Danny, we needed you. You brought such a calming presence to our culture. And that meant so much. It was a high performing school. It was in middle school, the kids were stressed out. Were they stressed? Like Yale, Harvard, all this stuff in 6th grade. Come on. You know what I mean? But the parents had power, a lot of influence. They had big futures for their kids, which they should, but people took themselves very seriously on campus. And so I was able to cut through some of that and bring down the temperature just a little bit. Maybe that was enough to unsettle some people, right? I don't know. But I love that comment. You brought this calming presence, right? And to me, that's what it was about.
Beautiful. Thank you both. I appreciate it. Glenn Robbins, this is a question for you. Considering the Stoic virtue of wisdom, how can okay, before I ask the question, let me phrase it this way. You play the role of superintendent and principal, right? I only play the role of a principal, and I cannot imagine how you do this. So this is the question for you. Considering the Stoic wisdom, virtue of wisdom, How can a school leader, particularly in your shoes, discern between what is within your control and what is beyond it, particularly when faced with the many challenges like teachers in your school, or students or parents in your school, and board members and people who want to address board issues? How do you manage all of this? Please teach us, for everyone here who wants to be a superintendent.
So that's a great question again. So thank you. I think we were just talking about bringing all these virtues together, right? And the tranquility and the equanimity that Daniel just mentioned. And I think that's something that I've been blessed with where I am now. I work in Brigantine Community School, the public school district, and everyone there works for the same reasons, for the kids. But I didn't always have Brigantine. I started Brigantine 4 years ago, and I've been blessed to be there ever since, because everybody put their egos aside and said, what is best for the kids? And they work so hard at that each and every day. So I'm thankful in that. But I know not everybody has the same opportunity. And I know I didn't have the opportunities coming up through the ranks. So, you have to have great people around you. You have to have that. You can hire yes people that say yes to you all the time, or you can hire people that push back on you and try to, make the district better. But that might hurt your ego if you hire just the pushback people, depending on what type of leader you are. And you have to realize, and we mentioned this in the book, things that you're in control of, your opinions, your goals, how you spend and choose your time, your temper, your attitude, and your character, right? I'm sure we posted a million pictures on our social media pages about that. And then following things you can't control. You can't control your students' lives. You don't know what's going on at home. You can help, but once they're home, they're home. You can't control the outcomes of these schools' initiatives. You can't control your teacher's classroom. You can try to do that, but you'll be the most hated person in the world trying to micromanage somebody. Your goal is to help grow them and help make them better as, classroom management, pedagogy, whatever it may be, getting them involved. But you're not going to go in there and dictate everything that's going on. You're not going to be writing a script. I would hope not. And unfortunately, I've seen districts that done that, where they've had all the grade level teach the same way. No imagination, no creativity, just robots. I can see the kids now in that class. I'd be running down the hall getting out of there. Your reputation, that's a real tough one, right? You think you have this great reputation. People, like Danny said, and you mentioned, just filling out the coffee. Your staff sees your mistakes. They see it more than you do. So own it. Accept that you're not perfect. And how can I get better? You can't always control your policies that you have. You can make a suggestion for change. You can work through that and pitch these ideas. But depending on where you are, you might not be able to do that with your school board or your superintendent. And lastly, how do you control parents and school members and community members? We all have those favorite Facebook pages or social media pages that tell you how much they love you, for all the sarcastic Jersey reasons that I'm saying right now. But, it goes back to, are you strong enough to have a diverse team that's going to make you better? Are you strong enough to have those intentional conversations with each and every constituency? So I am responsible for our students, our staff, all of our staff, not just the teachers, right? And everyone plays such a vital role. And you have to remember that. I think we forget that at times. Like the crossing guard is a big part of your school district. The lunch lady is a big part of your school district, right? The guys and gals that clean the hallways and so forth, huge part of your school district. The nurses, I can keep going on forever, right? Then you have your school board. Then you have city council. Then you have the other political leaders in town, whatever it may be, mayor, whatever it may be. Then you have, there's certain groups in town that each community has, how you working or communicating with them, and just continuous. But yet all you can control is who you are. But if you keep bringing the good each and every day, that's all you can bring. You can, the bad things are going to happen. My one boss used to say we're one banana peel away from slipping. And I know that that's the reality, right? There's like a landfill of banana peels everywhere. But, if you continue to be humble, grateful, helping people forward, your job is to make people better, that you're serving them, then everything else will follow suit. But sometimes, and a lot of times, I think we see this, right? Ego gets involved, greed gets involved, pride gets involved. I'm the furthest thing from knowing all the answers. I'm surrounded by great people who make me look great each and every day, and I'm thankful for that. And I'm not, that's something I'm not going to relinquish and never give up. I love having great people around me to make me better. And when there's a fault, I accept it. I'm happy for it because it's going to make me better and hopefully make the school better.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Glenn. Danny, this question is specifically for you as you coach and mentor many school leaders. How might Stoic teachings on learning and self-improvement empower school leaders to adopt a growth mindset and embrace lifelong learning, especially in the face of setbacks and criticism?
Some pet peeves, and one of them is principals that say they're lead learners and they're not learning anything. What in the world, right? All you're doing, like, I know you, and you told me you don't even read. So maybe if they would start a podcast, right? And wisdom and productivity, or better leaders, better schools, or whatever, and have these great discussions. And honestly, speaking of podcasts, that's why I started. I'd love to hear, Ephraim, why you started, but to me, I knew I had leadership gaps, right? And one of my answers to filling or trying to close the leadership gap was to talk to the Ephraims, to the Glenns of the world, learn from their stories of success and failure, and most importantly, take action on one idea. Because I like to say ideas are great, but not the greatest. You have to apply those things, and take action. So that's an important part of learning. But I think you were talking about the challenging times too, and the failures and that kind of thing. So let me tell a story about one of my coaches these days, and Dan Sullivan started a program called Strategic Coach. You and I might have talked about this before, maybe, but I don't remember. And he's written some books in the mainstream right now that are quite popular. Two big ones that people might be familiar with are these ideas. They're great. 10x is easier than 2x, and who, not how, right? But to answer your question specifically, Dan created a tool. He's into tools and has inspired me to create a bunch of tools. But he uses himself as sort of as a laboratory, an experiment. Can you imagine on the same day getting divorced and going bankrupt? How would you feel, right? And so Dan was like, I don't ever want to experience this again. So what can I do, to learn from it? And he created this tool where essentially you acknowledge reality as it is, and you write down the context, you know what I mean? And you don't hold back any punches at all. This is what happened. He did get divorced. There's a reason for that. He did go bankrupt. That doesn't just happen, right? Despite what you may see in the news, like, it doesn't just happen. And after you have this candid reflection of what's going on, what are 5 things, back to what we were talking about earlier with Glenn, what are 5 things within my control, right? So that it does never happen again, and reflect on that. And then finally, what are 5 things that I've learned from this experience that are actually positives that made me better, right? And if you think of like really challenging times and failures and that kind of stuff, it's hard to dig deep and find out like the positives, but talk about learning, back to obstacles of the way. Like, here's the thing. Nobody's perfect. I don't know about you guys, but even, I've been to therapy and that kind of thing. And
Me too.
Good. And it's just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Therapist. I do put this pressure on myself to be perfect, which is completely unrealistic. And I don't necessarily put that pressure on anybody else, just myself. And as totally unfair because it's imaginary. It's like you're measuring yourself against an ideal that will never happen. So anyway, confront reality, look for the positives, look for the learning moments. And if you do that enough, right, imagine all the growth that you're going to have. So that's something that, I encourage school leaders to do. I teach them that tool all the time. It is fantastic. And then think about this too. You got to be careful about what you share. But imagine a leader. Glenn said, your people see your mistakes better than you do. Imagine maybe it's just the leadership team. Maybe it's the staff. It depends on the context. So I don't want to prescribe anything. But imagine saying, hey, team, I blew that. Here's how I read the situation, right? Here's what I think happened. Here's 5 things that I'm going to do moving forward so it never happens again. Here's the 5 things I learned. What did I miss? Did I miss anything that you want to teach me in this moment? Imagine a leader who can do that. Wouldn't you want to be a part of that team? So, yeah,
Absolutely.
That's how I think about it, Ephraim.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. One of the endorsements of your book by Mike Lowenfeld, he was my boss at some point, and he was in my podcast, and he told me one of the biggest lessons I ever heard is embrace criticism. Doesn't matter from who it's coming from. It can be either who loves you or someone who hates you. Just evaluate the criticism. There might be something there that you can learn. I appreciate both of you. Let's take a quick pause to praise the Teach Better community.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
So let's talk about the concept of justice. How can school leaders balance the demands of various stakeholders while upholding ethical principles and prioritizing the common good of the school community?
One thing I'll just say very quick before Glenn jumps in, the piece that I mentioned about resisting vengeance is an important part that we include in the book. And Marcus Aurelius, back to quoting him, he said, leave other people's mistakes where they lie, right? So one reason I think we seek vengeance and that kind of thing is, again, taking it personally, but carrying that harm or perceived harm with us for far too long, So what would it feel like to just let it go and to keep moving forward? So that's something that I want to say about justice. Glenn, you have anything to add to it?
Yeah, so that's the great part, and that's the later part in that chapter that Danny just mentioned that really dives into it, because the justice of resistance and revenge is not something we would recommend to any of you. I think it's also being kind, being humble, being grounded. You mentioned all these things that Danny and I have been successfully recognized for in the past, but I look at them as like just another alphabet to my name, and or another thing collecting dust in the back of my office. It's great and all, and my team is the big reason why I get these things, but I have to realize that no matter what accolades come my way and or don't come my way, my job and responsibility is what is the greater good for our kids. Where are they coming from? Where are our staff members coming from? And how do we continue to make them better? You think about, you're trying to make a better school, but how do you do that when, some of your kids are not eating in the morning before they come to you? And or, are you recognizing their religious beliefs and backgrounds that they're not going to eat during the school day, or they can only eat certain things? So, and that's just a small 1% of what we do each and every day, but it's thinking about the justice of education for all of our particular students, all of our staff members. Each of them brings something dynamic to our district, and how do we recognize them and help them go through the day and celebrate them for who they are? And not just this person gets this because of that. No, it's everybody. All means all. And I think we lose concept of that sometimes. I think we allow national media to allow the things to blow up sometimes on that. And I think as long as you control what you can control, which is being loving and caring to these human beings to come to your room every day, you never know what you're going to do moving forward. And to Danny's point, with revenge, it's just thinking about this. Like in the one part of the book, we talked about Cato, and Cato gets punched in a bathhouse, and the guy that does it doesn't know it's him, and then finds out like a little bit later it's him, and he's like freaking out that he punched Cato of all people, and Cato's like, yeah, he punched me, like it happened, and he wasn't doing it to be an arrogant person, like it wasn't a hard punch. It was being mean, like, I've already moved on. Like there are bigger, worse things to deal with, and I'm not just going to focus on this one little thing. And I think that's we're all guilty of that sometimes. That we want to punch back right away, or is it really worth your time? One of my favorite quotes has always been Winston Churchill. If I stopped and threw stones at every dog that barked, I'd never get to where I'm going.
Mhm.
So for me, like I said, it's focusing on our kids, focusing on our staff, focusing on the overall district, and remembering all the great things that go on each and every day.
Beautiful. Thank you both. Let's talk about courage, the value of courage, especially in an era of school shootings, of traumatic events, of supporting educators who feel society is stepping on them. And yet we have to somehow inspire them and coach them to confront those challenges in order to affect that positive change. How do we build courage within ourselves and others?
Yeah, Danny, I'll let you jump in. I talked a little bit.
Sure. Partly perspective, some that I'm resonating and want to chime in on here. Efrain, that you said, like, feeling that society's, jumping on you or whatever. And yes, and maybe, right? And what I mean by that is educators do have it tough right now. And to me, and this is a personal opinion, but like book bannings and things like that we see, I think that's crazy. That's my personal opinion. Like, what are you doing, right? Yeah. And so that there's pressures like that. But maybe, if I was sitting with you and you're a teacher and you're like talking about all the stuff that's getting you down, I would say, well, show me where that society is, like right here in this moment right now. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like the boogeyman. It's like out there, but is it here? And again, it's like confronting reality. And so I'm not talking about like ignoring the pressures that might be out there. But if you're leading a school and you're creating a space where, Glenn said there's districts that prescribed all the curriculum. If that's not your school and there's creativity and imagination and autonomy and that kind of stuff, right? If you're not banning books or whatever, you know what I mean? You have created, I don't want to call it a bubble, but you've created an environment that is different than what you might see on the news and that kind of thing. So it doesn't mean that the stuff that's happening out there isn't real, but is it real right here? There's a mental model that's called the map is not the territory, which is one of my favorite mental models. And the idea is that, like, I don't know about you guys, but whether it's a map in your hand, like the old school days, or Google Maps, Apple Maps, Waze, you can use that and get lost still. And how's that possible? Well, that's possible because you were following directions that weren't linked with actual reality where you were located. And so I like playing with those ideas quite a bit, because again, I think that's back to also what's within your control or not, So it would depend, and you feel free to throw out a specific scenario, but that would be one way that I would deal with it. And I would be, I'd be curious. I'd be asking a lot of questions to that teacher who might feel, society. Yes. And Where's that right here, right? Or are you bringing it here in your mind, in your heart? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, yeah. So I hope that's making sense.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I'll add on to that.
Please.
One quote from Seneca: "If you really want to escape the things that harass you, what you're needing is not a different place, but to be a different person."
Mm.
So we think about courage and courage, because everything, there's, like Danny mentioned, obstacles the way earlier, right? So anything that comes to you, you can look at it as like a detriment, or you can look at it as an extreme opportunity. How do you adjust and how do you make this better? Like you mentioned earlier about Mike Lieberfeld giving you advice about criticism. Most people turn that off and run the other way and ignore it, and then just let it bottle up, and then the meetings get uglier and longer, and then you probably don't have a job much longer. But if you look at it from that lens and actually have a conversation with those people, why do you feel this way? And what can we do differently? I think that's the one thing I enjoyed about reading about Seneca, and the one book, Dying Every Day. I don't know if you've read that.
Another one.
It's an amazing book. It's about how Seneca deals working with Nero, one of the most deadliest emperors of all time. And what he knows by this is like, he's the emperor that brings back, the mom brings back Seneca to train him, to tutor him to Nero. Nero obviously doesn't get this. Nero ended up killing his mom, kills like a bunch of other people. He even kills a young kid, and then invites the father to dinner that night, hoping that the father says some remark that he can kill him too. Like he's just doing this all for fun. And and I'm not relating this to school in this way, but this boss is crazy. And, Seneca's like, all right, I can stay with him and I'll prosper and I'll rise up, or I don't, and he kills me. So everything I'm doing one way or another, if I try to give him advice, he might kill me. If I don't give him advice, he's going to kill me. How do you navigate those fields? And I took it from the lens, like, of working for some anti-heroes and for some really bad people. Like, are they going to destroy my career? Are they going to put me out there that no one's ever going to hire me again, that I can't branch out and do something different? So it made me think about emotional intelligence a lot more and deeper dive into that. But, going back to Danny's point with that courage is seeking out the advantages or the opportunities that come from it. Most people, I look at it like COVID was awful and, brought so many deaths to so many people. But from a perspective of where our leadership was in our school, it brought our team together. It brought our community together more than ever. It brought our school to higher heights than before because we were able to transform and move forward. So instead of saying, woe was us, then we led the country in unforeclosed homes and unemployment, and had all the other things going on in society. We said, how can we make this better? And I think that's going back to my first quote, right? You can't escape to someplace else. People take expensive vacations to get away from themselves, but yet themselves are still there. You have to look at it from a different mindset. And I think that's ultimately what it is what is your mindset?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you both. Let's talk for a moment on the productivity part, on how to actually do this. So managing anger is a stoic way of addressing things. But we tend to believe that being stoic means that nothing happens to you. You don't feel anything. You are unfazed by everything. And obviously that is not. How do you both address when you're getting upset, pissed, frustrated, disappointed, and you just want to flip the table? How do you breathe? Do you take a walk? Do you meditate? What is that you do? What advice do you have for those on the trenches who are going through the same things?
People have that problem?
Yeah. They haven't made it to your level yet, Glenn.
Right. Who doesn't have these moments? Who doesn't want to scream? Like I listen to all kinds of music. I listen to heavy metal for a reason, man. Come on. Like I'm out there. Like that's part of my getting it out. Like I'm jamming in the car. but no, you can't bottle it up. And I always equate for any Seinfeld episode fans out there where it's like Serenity now. And Lloyd Braun comes at the end and says at the end, it's insanity later. You can't let it bottle up. You have to find ways to allow yourself to vent. But at the same time, like I mentioned earlier, once you start raging and people see that, where are you venting? Where are you putting yourself to do that? Because if you start punching the air, the world's not going to pay attention to you. It's what good does that do? And once you start saying something wrong out loud to somebody else or criticize somebody else, and they hear it, because you couldn't keep your tongue for 2 seconds, it's going to come back and bite you. So are you walking? Are you working out? Are you meditating? Are you doing yoga? Are you, like to Danny's point, Danny coaches a lot of leaders. Do you have a coach or mentors or friends that you can speak with and share these ideas out? I do this all the time where I call up random supers across the country and say, hey, I'm going through this scenario. I've already done it 10 times, but how would you do it on the 11th time? I think having that network is monumental. That's how Danny and I met, right? We connected on social media. That's how we met you. I didn't know you, and here you are on social media, and you pitched it to us and said, hey, how do we talk and get through it? I'm so excited for that because now I've made a new friend. Now I have a new person that I can reach out to and say, hey man, are you okay? And vice versa. And I think that's something we don't do enough. We do not ask our fellow people or networks across the country or across the state or across town lines, are you doing okay? We're in this together. When you're in competition, that's lower level stuff. But when you're doing collaborative work, you're really raising the bar. And I think, I say this a lot because we're in the Northeast, or at least where I'm at, it's a dog eat dog world, right? Whereas I go to different parts of the country and people are super nice and they get along. But imagine if we could work together for the common good. And we actually did ask, are you okay? As I was writing this book, I was talking to a couple of superintendents that were just like going through all those scenarios, if not worse, or, people putting stuff online. And I looked over like at a commercial. I'm like, hey, first time, like, are you okay? Like, I've experienced before, how are you dealing with it? Let them talk it through and then maybe give them some guidance as well. And to Danny's point too earlier with the coaching and the mentoring, I often ask people much younger than me for advice, the reverse mentor. I already had the anti-hero, which Danny mentioned, the people we wouldn't want to work for. And I also turn to books such as this, right, and dive into philosophy and say, how in the world did this person rule or deal with this 2,000 years ago with the same type of mentality? But it's not easy, but what a world it could be if we actually came together and worked together instead of splitting differences and or red or blue or your backgrounds or whatever it is that you like. What if we did the right thing and just teamed up and said, can we work together somehow, some way?
Beautiful.
Let me ask you good points there. Oh, can I add to it a little quick?
Go ahead, Danny. I'm sorry.
Just well, I think there's a couple of pieces that are really important to highlight. One being don't go alone, right? And I coach and mentor school leaders, but I might not be the coach or mentor for you, right? There's a very specific kind of leader that I work with. In any ways, I just know that isolation is the enemy of excellence, as Greg Sacicoli says, right? And what I say is when you get better, everybody wins, right? And I know that we're better together. So that's one piece. And then we connect some other dots, talked about Draymond Green, right? He succumbs to anger. And Glenn brought in the story about Cato getting punched in the face, right? And he's like, oh, did I get hit, right? So there's different responses that you can have. We wrote in the book that anger is the punishment you give to yourself for somebody else's mistakes. Think about that. So somebody does something silly, right? And it hurts. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt, but anger is the punishment you give to yourself, right? And a lot of these things that we talk about when we carry them with us, from where I was talking about letting go, you think that person who did whatever to you, right? The supervisor who made my life hard. If I was still dwelling on that, you think she's not thinking about me right now? You know what I mean? but I could be carrying something from years and years ago that's like messing up my right now with Ephraim and Glenn. No, like that'd be silly. My last thing I'll say is that it depends. It's a worldview, philosophy, right? It's a worldview, so you can accept it or not. And what I tell everybody, especially when I'm coaching them, it's worked for me, it's worked for other people I've coached, but I don't know if it's going to work for you. Let's talk about it, try it out, and see. And if you don't get a result, then say, okay, Glenn and Danny, Ephraim, they don't know what they're talking about. I need to find something else. Or try it out and say, wow, this produced a positive result. So my point there is the worldview is that anger is the opposite of strength, right? So if you want to consider yourself a strong leader, then when you succumb to anger and those kind of things, you're actually being weak in that moment. Is that what you want? For me, no, I don't want that. So I got to figure out different ways. And you asked, how do we deal with it? Yes to walking. Yes to lifting weights. That's a great way to work out some stuff, or long runs, right? I think Ephraim, you've run before too. Meditation, absolutely, right? So these are journaling. We talked about, learning from mistakes. So those are all great ways to process it. Thanks for
Danny, I have to
letting me
tell
jump
you,
in.
I will have loved to see my principal going through with a skateboard to the school. So that's I'm sure another way to let all that stress go away.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
in Marcus Aurelius' meditations, he begins thanking all these mentors, right? And it says this precedent of what you guys have just mentioned, that this is not a alone party. This is you with everybody else. Who are your main, and there's only so much time in which you should show, one or two influences or mentors that for
Two.
you to be grateful that you want to mention on the show?
Ooh, just two.
That's how I learned about Epictetus, by Marcus Aurelius mentioning him. I was like, oh, that name sounds interesting, right? Like, so who knows, by the two or maybe three that you mentioned, the listener of the show might say, who's that guy? And they might read their book or see their influence in the world.
So I have two. First, and there's so many amazing people who helped me out along my journey, right? So let's not sell that short. I'd say first would be Bob Gargiulo. He's a retired superintendent now. You probably won't find him on social media, but he helped me change to who I am in so many different ways. And then the tag team, it's Mike and Nick. So Mike Lieberfeld and Nick Polyak, because they're together all the time. So that counts as one. They have been monumental to me throughout my journey through social media, long before I was even a principal. And so I'm always grateful for those individuals.
Beautiful.
Right.
And Danny?
Well, I mentioned Dan Sullivan earlier, so I'll mention him as strategic coach again. And listen, they mostly help businesses grow, right? But they have a ton of thinking tools and stuff like that I think school leaders might find relevant as well. So I'll just mention them. Like their program isn't for them to join, but if you check out their content, I think there's useful stuff. And that's something that I love to do, right? Learn from other industries and build that bridge to implement it into school. And then somebody else that I'll mention is a guy named Christopher Lockhead, who's really mentoring me a lot right now. Him and Eddie Yoon and Katrina Kirsch, they form a team called the Category Pirates. And not to get too nerdy, but they're coaching me and mentoring me in how to build things in a different way, right? Because when you do that, there's no competition. And that's a unique idea. I really like that. So big shout outs to them for sure.
Beautiful. And my last question. One of the most complicated tasks of an educational leader is that sometimes you have to dismiss or fire people.
Mm-hmm.
How does one can apply all this Stoic learning on how to do this in a way that is compassionate, in a way that says the dignity of the person that you had to let go, especially thinking that you might be taking away how they maintain their family, and not doing a Machiavellian way where you just destroy the career of this person because they were not a good match to your school or to your school district.
That's the worst part of the job. I don't know how many times I've had to go through that process. I remember being a first or second year assistant principal in a building with over 300 plus people. We had 2,700 kids. And the state had just came out with a brand new budget process that was going to decimate numbers. And I had to hand out pink slips, the possibility that they might be getting laid off, or at least talked about in the board meetings to come about the budget. So over 100 plus staff members in one day. And that was my directive from my boss. You have to do it all in one day. And it is never easy. No matter how you go about it, try to be compassionate or empathetic. Someone's going to look at you, you're evil, and you're just not a good person. You destroyed my livelihood. And I think that's the part where you have to have some kind of temperance. You have to have some type of wisdom to know that, and courage to do. It's the worst part of the job. But at the same time, your overall responsibility is what? The organization and or that building. And you have to think about once again, what is the job overall? And what is the job overall is to give the best possible learning experience to our children and to create the best possible culture for our staff. So that one, I highly recommend talking to other people on how they've gone through it. Because like I said, I've done it too many times to count. And each time, those are the things that weigh on me. We talk about hey, being stoic and cold. I wear my heart on my sleeve still. And those are the things that really still hurt me internally that I cannot really move on from, because I feel like I failed. I couldn't do my best to get them to where they needed to be, or I should have did more. Whereas I've worked with a lot of people that said, here you go, thank you, goodbye. I don't want to be that guy. So yeah, I don't think I have a perfect answer for you, except seek out advice, seek out legal counsel as well. What the recommendations be. Work with your school board, and your boss, if it's superintendent or principal. When you're going through this process, get some kind of maybe a script or whatever it may be, but try to humanize it. Trying to be somewhat compassionate. Sorry, guys, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
Yeah, but why sugarcoat something that's never going to be easy? You know what I mean? So it's back to confronting reality. So I think great advice there. And again, connecting, right? Like not doing it in isolation, although you might have to deliver the information potentially independently. I think, back to the wisdom piece, having some discernment around, is it a budget cut thing? Like it actually has nothing to do with the person or their performance. It's like out of our hands. And there's a way of thinking about that. Or is this somebody who's actually like, ineffective as a teacher or potentially harming kids? There's different scenarios of this as well. But at the end of the day, like having the wisdom and compassion to I think shooting straight, so to speak, right? People say that but don't try to like feedback sandwich it or like get to the point. It's not going to be easy for them. It's not going to be easy for you. Don't think that it will be, right? And I don't actually know anybody that looks forward to it. If I did, they'd probably be like, that's a weirdo. Like, why do they like that? You know what I mean? So knowing that, be ready for all sorts of emotions, that might be there, whether it's within you, but certainly within the staff member getting laid off. I would think, what does support look like for him or her? So is there some kind of like, I don't know, counselor or something like, you know what I mean? If they want to speak to somebody, If they're not harming kids, they weren't just the right fit for you culturally, or again, like budgetary reasons. Can I would think about, is there a way to set them up for success next time? But to Glenn's point, they probably still were going to think that you're the devil, right? And that you're the worst person in the world. Well, you chose to be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be principal, superintendent, whatever, there's going to be this situation that you're going to have to. Kids will also, I have a hit, right? Students have been shot. You were in Chicago. Like, I've lost kids to violence. You know what I mean? It's going to happen. And so you just got to think about, what do you also need as the leader? And we talked about therapy, right, Ephraim? So what do you need to support yourself as well within these moments? So yeah, it's no fun. Usually when I'm coaching somebody around this, I tell them, well, what are you going to do for yourself afterwards, right? It's not like a celebration, but what can you do that will bring up your spirits a little bit afterwards? Because it never feels great, So hopefully that helps.
Beautiful. There you go. Staying Calm in the Chaos with Daniel Bauer and Glenn Robbins. Buy your book. Buy your book. Have it in your library. Give it to your team. Is a quick read, beautiful, insightful. Gentlemen, any last thoughts for the viewers and listeners of the show?
For sure, because conceptually we talked about virtues today, but I want to talk about the framing of the book in 30 seconds or less. You can read it. It's under 100 pages, so you can read it quickly, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and get to work. But the other reason to pick it up, and Ephraim said buy it, there's case studies, this situation, that situation, and how would you deal with it? And that's a great leadership book study. Like, we did that intentionally, because the talk about, I have a championship winning football coach who's doing shady under the table deals with Nike. What do I do? Right? Like, that's an important discussion to have, because guess what? We've experienced it. And the kid who, tragic loss of life, all the stuff. So if you haven't experienced what we talk about case study wise in the book, you will, and this will better prepare you, and you need to discuss it as a leadership team.
Beautiful. Glenn?
That was pretty well done, Danny. I think that's
he's a pro. Right? He's a pro.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of it. And like Mike said, it'll be a reference on everybody's desk. Not everybody has a great mentor. Not everybody has a great leadership experience. Not everybody has somebody they can reach out to. Here you get the Stoics of thousands of years ago, and you get scenarios and practical situations that Danny and I broke down that will lead you. And to Danny's point, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when that you're going to experience these things and more. And like we mentioned, as you reread this book, different ideas will come to mind, for different scenarios. Like when we reread this through editing a bunch of times, it was like, oh man, I should have put this situation there instead. And the next time it's like, oh, it could have been that situation instead. We all experience these things. But to Danny's point, if we can sit down at the table with our leadership teams, new or veteran or whatever it may be, and say, hey, what would you do here? Would make our team stronger. And ultimately, that your best leaders, and that's your job as a mentor, right? Your best leaders are eventually going to move on, and you hope that they do. And you make them better than what you were. We think this book is going to help you do that, because it gives all the practicality and situations in there. Plus with some amazing human beings from thousands of years ago, Stoic knowledge that is still being spoken about today. Something to think about. I think it's an incredible book we put together that's really going to help a lot of different people, wherever you are.
Beautiful. Awesome. So honored you guys took the time to be in the show. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Ephraim Martinez.
Chulo.
And I love that production. Chill out.